Hello there guys, Daniel Childs back here again. Team select time for the game against Bournemouth. The return of Chelsea, the return of Premier League football after an international break that was a lot more exciting and headline grabbing and contentious than I think a lot of us expected. But if you want to hear about the Civil War, Bowl League, Barley, we've spoken about that enough this week. There's at least 3 shows on it, so please go and check those out. This is going to be about the football. This is going to be about the Bournemouth game. A game where hopefully Chelsea can show a lot of the positives and kind of cover the negatives and hide them and put them away into a box we never see again that we've seen so far this season. It hasn't been a nightmare, but it hasn't been great. And I think that the Palace game was a great example of the positives and negatives we have currently seen. And I think there are some concerns going into this game. I think Bournemouth are a potentially dangerous opponent for Chelsea given their form and their threats and their potential strengths that could hurt Chelsea. But Chelsea also do have some strengths and I think some intriguing points and potential players who could be featuring in this game for the very first time for Chelsea, which is a little bit exciting. So let's get into it. So team news, this is the big thing, and it's a bit negative on this front. We had a few weeks without injury problems, but it started to creep up again. No Malo Gusto, no Reece James, so no kind of big first choice or recognisable right back, or is there a potential other option? We'll get into that when I talk about my team. No Romeo Lavia, he's still out. So really, Chelsea are a little bit more depleted than would have been hoped for. Ben Chilwell, Maresca was asked about him. He spoke a little bit about him and potentially being included and submitted for Chelsea's Premier League squad. It has to be submitted today because we've seen the Conference League squad. He wasn't included in that. So really, I think for Chilwell, he is, one of these players that they clearly wanted to get rid of. They couldn't. I think now you try and reintegrate him. That doesn't mean that Maresca has to start him, but I just don't see the point of him just being isolated. I don't know what Chilwell has done, in a public sense to be isolated like that. Maybe his future gets resolved in January, but for the time being, he's a Chelsea player. I think it's trying to settle that and maybe giving him some football. But the weird thing for me, I just think it was a little bit stupid to not include him in the Conference League squad personally because, I think that at the very least, you could have covered yourself there where he could have got some minutes, even off the bench. The fact that, the Premier League is actually where he's less likely to get minutes. Where is he going to get these minutes now? Maybe in the Carabao Cup, but we'll see. So it's a bit of a mess. But listen, let's move into Bournemouth and what they're going to be providing. I think that Bournemouth are a very commendable and I think potentially dangerous team for Chelsea because last season, I think Areola has done a really, really competent job with them in terms of making them very good at the basics. They have some talented individuals, mainly Semenyo, who I think is their most talented and dangerous player from a wide position. He also scores quite a few goals for them. I think, especially now Dominic Solanke has moved on, I think will be seen as kind of the guy to have the burden. But I think just generally with Tavernier, Christie, Cook, I think they've got a bunch of players who just do the best as a team. I think, especially from set pieces, I think we spoke about this when we last faced them. I think as a team, they do the basics very well. And that may seem simple. It may seem obvious. I think the Premier League gets you a long way, especially if you want to be kind of secure mid-table. I think that's what Bournemouth are with a sprinkling of trickery and technique on top of that. I think that's what Bournemouth have now. And you actually look at their start to the season, it hasn't been that bad. I think they were a little bit unfortunate against Newcastle where a late basically handball decision, I don't think it was handball, prevented them from getting all 3 points against Newcastle, and that's kind of a sign of how dangerous they can be. I think they really hurt Newcastle. They pressed them high, they harried them, and at set pieces they were a threat too. So that I think is what Chelsea are going to have to expect at the Vitality tomorrow night. They beat Everton, obviously the latest Premier League win of all time in terms of turning around a 2-0 deficit. That I think the story of that was much more on Everton's collapse, but of course it was still a brilliant turnaround for Bournemouth. Kepa starting his first game now on loan at Bournemouth, obviously won't be playing tomorrow. And their other games this season, a 1-1 draw of Forest on the opening day and a loss to West Ham in the Carabao Cup. So in some ways it's been mixed. Maybe they should have won at least one more game, but it hasn't been bad. It's been commendable, and I think they'll go into this game, especially at home where they have an all right record against Chelsea, feeling like they could get points. And I think that for me, looking at Chelsea into this game, I think the big concern is in terms of transition, It's in terms of that midfield problem I've consistently spoke about, where Chelsea seem to leave large gaps, or their gaps to open up, and that mobility problem and that balance problem, where I feel like a good team potentially on the counter could really hurt Chelsea. And especially if Bournemouth are going to press Chelsea high. We saw the way Wolves created a lot of good opportunities against Chelsea. The 6-2 result makes it look like it was a very lopsided game, and it obviously was in the second half. But even in that second half, where Chelsea scored pretty much every chance they had, especially through Noni Madueke, there were still big chances for Wolves. So for me, it's that kind of disparity at the moment where I have a lot of confidence that Chelsea will score goals. I think they have a good attacking unit. I think we've become a lot more of a productive team. I know that is something that may still jar with people. I'm not saying we're the most ruthless team in the world, but I feel like it has improved in that aspect. So I think Chelsea, from an attacking point, especially on the right side, we've got some very good informed players who I think will impact things. It's just defensively and in terms of midfield structure that concern me, and flows in the game that I think you saw in Palace, where Chelsea can be good and look structured and look well in control, especially in possession for periods of the game, but then it fluctuates, and it can fluctuate in a matter of minutes, really. And I think that is what Bournemouth will be hoping, is that they will ride the storm of Chelsea, keep our attack at bay, and then hopefully be able to be in a good position to then maybe impact the game later on, or whenever Chelsea falter. That's the problem at the early stages of Maresca, is it feels very, very fragile, Chelsea's control, at least at the current point. And that is why teams may feel they've got an opportunity to hurt Chelsea in key periods of the game. Before we do get into my lineup, I want to shout out the guys, great guys at Alloy Collectors, who have once again very kindly sent me one of their metal shirts, and this time it's the Retro 98 kit. I've talked about this before. It's that kit right there. This is the one that inspired that kit last season that I loved. I have to say, I put the classic 25 number, just an iconic number in Chelsea history. No, not for Moises Caicedo, for Gianfranco Zola. This is an iconic Chelsea shirt, and I love the fact they're starting to do retros. I'm going to kind of, try and see if I can convince them to make the 0405 kits, because I think they are deemed to be retro. But this is a great collectible. It can sit on your desk, on a shelf if you're getting Chelsea collectibles. I think it'd be a great gift for a Chelsea fan, friends, family, maybe a partner as well. If they're a Chelsea fan, I think it's absolutely worth getting. I think it's good, thoughtful, and it's made by great people. Football fans, even some Chelsea fans who, love football, want to make great stuff for football fans to get and collect. And I think it is a well-worthy, officially licensed product as well. Collectible, good quality, easy to make. You can get them in different styles. You can get the goalkeeper kit. You can get this season's kit if you like it. I'm not a fan, but you can get it. And as well, because you are my listeners, my viewers, you can get 15% off at checkout using my discount code SonOfChelsea. So I just want to say a massive thank you to the guys at Alloy Collectors. And if you can go down there, use my code, it helps out the channel, it helps out the guys at Alloy Collectors, and I think they absolutely deserve your support, because I think they're creating some great collectibles. But let's get into it with my lineup. So Chelsea, in some ways at this stage of the season, I think I thought it would be a lot more difficult to predict Chelsea teams, and actually it's been a little bit easier. Some of this always is influenced by injuries, because if certain positions are just out, you kind of expect that, well, who else is going to play there? But then also I think in the way that Maresca has set his stall out, that he sees in certain positions there's a Premier League choice and there's a Conference League choice, or maybe a Carabao Cup choice. In this sense, we know that Robert Sanchez is going to be starting this game. He just is, because he is the Premier League first choice keeper. Again, we have to see over a longer period of time. I think he's had some dodgy moments so far this season. He had a really good moment at Wolves where he helped create the second goal, but I think there are still some big concerns, but he is the first choice. Then we get to right back. My gut and kind of my logic is telling me that Axel Disasi will play in this role, simply because in both of the games against Servette, he started at right back. I don't think this is a good option. I have real fears of Axel Disasi having some real problems in this game. I think he's looked really shaky. He doesn't look comfortable in that position when he gets dragged out wide, especially when you think about what the right back in Maresca's system is being asked to do. Unless he kind of just quits it for this game. Of course, they're being asked to invert a lot of the time. So maybe, just maybe, he looks at Renato Vega and thinks, you're versatile enough, mate, you're going to go over to the other side for this game, because then he knows Vega can naturally invert into central midfield. But I wouldn't mind seeing Josh Akpom being given a start. I don't think he will, but at the very least, Akpom, obviously we saw at the end of last season for Pochettino off the bench, and he's impressed with the academy. Apparently within the club he's well thought of, so that's a positive for him. So hopefully we'll see him maybe against Barrow in a couple of weeks' time in the Carabao Cup. But this would be a great chance to blood a youngster and kind of see if there are internal options. But I just feel the only other alternative here is maybe him looking at Fofana and moving Wesley Fofana to right back, because we've already seen him kind of take up those positions already. And then you bring in Tosin Adarabioyo to partner Levi Colwill. But I do think either Agapom or Dazassi, or maybe a wild shout, putting Vega on the other side. And then what you have is also a good thing to remember that Cucurella at times played at right back last season too for Mauricio Pochettino. So Cucurella could move over to the other side, and then you do play Vega. So there are options here, not amazing options, but there are alternatives for Enzo Maresca, especially if he's focused on that guy who's going to be able to move into central midfield. I just don't think Dazassi will provide that for you, which means that Fofana, Colwill, I think they're the first choice back two. You want to stick with them, especially I'm interested to see how Colwill does in this game. If he can continue the progressive passing we've seen that have contributed to some good attacking moves for Chelsea. We'll look at that a little bit more next week. Marco Correa, left back. Central midfield, I mean, I just don't think there's a lot of other options here. Moises Caicedo, I think, will play at the base of midfield. You've still got no Romeo Lavia. And I think Enzo Fernandez. Now, Enzo Fernandez, for me, in terms of performance level, I don't think merits continuing to start for Chelsea. I just don't think he's been good enough. I thought his performance against Palace was really poor. But again, I'd still prefer him in the team than Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. And in terms of central midfield, we've spoken about this before. Is Carney Chukwuemeka going to be reintegrated soon? I mean, I don't think he'll start this game. Maybe in a few weeks' time, he makes himself known to Maresca and maybe impresses in a few other games that gets him a chance in the Premier League. But I think for the time being, Caicedo and Fernandes, I think, are a pretty safe bet to start for Chelsea in central midfield. Then we get into the attacking area of the pitch. Now, I think there's a big question here. I think between starting Jadon Sancho for the first time, who's been at Cobham over the international break and has probably impressed, and you know, this is the moment for him to start his first Chelsea game and show his credentials, or Christopher Nkunku, who I think is going to be a big player for Chelsea and should be. But then it's my dilemma, and I was speaking with this with Louis on the Chelsea Echo Pod, that if Nkunku is just going to be used as a wide player like a left winger, I'd prefer him just not to start, because I just think it's a waste of his talent. He needs to be a second striker. He needs to be able to float around the centre forward, and I don't think the way I saw he was used in the first Premier League game against Man City, I prefer him in floating off the centre forward. And unfortunately, what you've got currently is Noni Madueke, who is in the best form of his career, or at least Chelsea career. He done well, obviously, with England on international duty. He has been an integral player for Chelsea so far, and you want him starting. He is full of confidence. He clearly wants to make an impression, make this his season at Chelsea. So I want to be starting him, and that right flank looks a lot more promising than the left side. So I think Madueke for me will start on the right. I think Palmer will kind of play that inside right role that I think has worked for Chelsea in recent days, or recent games, sorry. And then on the left side, we're going to go Jadon Sancho. I think Sancho will get his first Chelsea start. I would like seeing Nkunku here, but again, it's only with the caveat that Nkunku is playing more centrally than actually left wing. And of course, Sancho is more of a left winger, but I think that left wing spot is up for grabs. I think Mudryk is in real trouble now because Neto can play there, Sancho can play there. Even Nkunku, I think, could do a more decent job. So yeah, I think that Sancho will get his first start. And of course, Nicholas Jackson has scored in his last 2 Premier League games. Let's hope he can make it a third. So for Chelsea, the table will look more healthy if we start. Sorry for the most obvious thing ever, but given the negativity and concern and criticism I've had and others have about Chelsea, at this stage of the season, you can't go overboard. Because it only takes about 2 or 3 wins in a row and Chelsea will skyrocket up the table. I think it's just that kind of balance thing at the moment that I'm still very curious and I've got trepidation around, because I think Chelsea are just not stable enough in games at the moment to kind of make you feel like they're not going to go through a very rocky period. And until they can ride through that and potentially solve that, they're going to be quite an unpredictable team. I think they will score. I have a confidence that we will find the back of the net in this game. It's just how many chances we give away and whether Chelsea can sustain enough control in the game to stop those threats, I think, at set pieces and also in transition from Bournemouth, who probably will go into this game feeling confident. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.